Greetings, my warriors. Welcome back to another episode. Today we do chapter 39 of the year 1050. As I've mentioned for this third section, every chapter is a new year. So, if you'll please follow along with me, let us go into our next chapter. Chapter 39, 1050. At the city of Nidaros, the king sat and contemplated insult. Here he spent the night alone, looking out over his throne room, where he would oft meet with fine fellow leaders and learn of their plight or demands. The former he'd curse for their weakness, the latter he'd curse for their brazen posture and greed. He held a large horn in his hand, filled with strong mead, and watched the fire crackle low in the center of the room. He wore his fine robe and his crown. His fingers were adorned with rings, and he sat upon the throne of his kingdom. And he was alone. On the morrow, he'd have Einar Thambarskelfir here to his hall. The man was a persistent pain to Harald's rule, always challenging him in words when he wasn't doing so with actual force. During one instance, the most egregious of them was when Einar had come to Harald's hall for a meeting of import. Harald had invited the old boar himself to discuss the consolidation of the kingdom and hoped to mend the rift that had always been between them. Harald remembered standing by the table that day, conversing with one of his jarls about some land dispute or other. There was always some fucking land dispute in this kingdom. When he heard that there were ships landing, this pleased Harald, as ships landing could mean that they who came brought with them tribute to his kingship, horses or furnishing. This seemed wholly unlikely from Einar, but not impossible. Perhaps he'd had a revelation of patriotism and now desired to keep the kingdom strong under the rule of one man, a strong and prosperous king. When Harald had emerged from the hall, he saw instead something deeply unsettling. The memory of that day still made him shudder, though he'd never admit this. There on the shore below, walking up the long road, through the wild wind and the rain, walked Einar Thambalskerfir, at the head of an armed host of 500 men. In the moment, Harald stood dumbfounded as they approached. Einar held his head high, unhelmed and proud as ever, and walked right up to the king. "My liege," he said perfunctorily. As he stood, his men crowded behind him in neat ranks and stood with shields and spears ready. The move was obvious. The statement was clear. Harold's authority was being confronted openly, but without an express invitation to warring. Einar spoke with the language of 500 warriors, saying that he was ready to fight. Harald needed only decide when and where. Harald's wife emerged from the hall with her fine fur robes against the cold and the rain. His attendants emerged as well, and all looked to the king for his response. This provocation could be enough to declare war among others. It was clearly meant to show that Einar was ready for such an outcome, whenever Harald was. All looked to Harald. "Lord Thambarskelfir, it saddens me to learn you are not comfortable traveling these days without so much a bodyguard. Are you in need of more protection? I could add warriors from among my own army to bolster your rank here. Why, I'm sure that with little effort I could easily triple your number here to make you feel safe. Perhaps even more than triple. Would you like a retinue of tenfold this number to see you safe home when you leave here? Perhaps I'll have such an order drafted. I could do so right now. Little effort. Harald stared at Einar coolly, not flinching, barely blinking. His breathing was calm and measured, his stare unyielding. The Thambarskelfir, for his part, was as unmoved by Harald's words as Harald had been by his presence, and stood with equanimity, though not as much poise as Harald. That won't be necessary. I feel safe enough. No need to put yourself out on my account, Lord King. It's no trouble at all, but the snap of my finger is all it would take. For another long moment, the men stood there staring at each other in the cold rain. Well, I would rather you both continue this conversation in the hall, Queen Elisif said. This weather is hardly the place to speak of such matters as personal security. My wise wife is right, Einar. Come into the thing room, and we'll have a proper meeting. These men you've brought with you will be attended while they are here. Meat and mead for all. The men didn't cheer, though they didn't show any hostility to his words either. That had been earlier in this year, and Harald still thought about it. Here he was in the winter of that year, and again he'd have to see that man. Long had that meeting weighed upon him. Long had the threat galled him for its boldness. That boldness would be answered for, not for the laws of honor or fealty, but for simple revenge. Tomorrow Einar would come to this hall for a meeting in the thing room with his king. Who knows how much insult he'd bring with him this time? Whatever he may bring with him, Harald sat here, drinking and contemplating how he'd deal with it. He breathed in deeply and let out a loud moan through his nose. Then he hawked and spat into the empty room. He'd ordered his guard to leave him be, to sit here. Harald liked to sit alone in this room, his room. Here, he ruled in this city. Here he was the great one, and he liked to really see, who was with him. The king was the loneliest man in the kingdom. He was alone. And that was how it ought to be. Everyone he'd ever called friend were now either faithful subjects who loved him or were dead. That was it. The mead horn emptied as he took another drink, and he stood to fill it anew from the table that had many drinks and food lain upon it. Every and anything he could want, always at his fingertips. No longer had he to hunt for anything, to struggle for anything, but for the maintenance of this kingdom. There was a cask of dark beer on the table that lay on its side, in two brackets made to hold it, ready to pour, and he turned the spigot. The night black beer filled his horn, and he wondered idly if it was poisoned. Where had this beer come from? Ulf, oh, spake, son, he reminded himself. The man I made my marshal. You wouldn't wish me dead, would you, Ulf? He drank a deep draught from the beer and stood there a moment, feeling the cool run down to his belly. I guess not, he said with a shrug, and returned to his seat. Come on, Tambarskelfir. Come to my hall. I am ready for you. He sat here contemplating insult. By eve of the next night, Einar Thambarskelfir stood at the prow of his leading longship and beheld the city of Nidaros as it approached. He wanted fervently to be here in the morning, but the tides and the winds had taken their toll upon his progress. He came with 4 ships this time. He'd made his boastful show to Harald last time, and he didn't need to flaunt his power here again like that. Today he brought only a handful of his huskarls for protection. These men were fiercely devoted to him and would die in his place if they needed to. The huskarls were a servant, a warrior, and a bodyguard. who was bound to his house and were paid exceedingly well in riches and lands of his territories. The men were all equipped with the finest weaponry that could be forged of iron, and many among them were noble born, which only added to their repute. Einar looked up to the dark sky. The dark black there was marred only by a little by the cold white of the clouds under the stars that obscured their view. The whole world smelled cold, and to this world he shuddered. He tried to shake the sensation that something horrid was coming for him. He felt safe, of course. Harald was the host of this meeting, and the laws of hospitality would protect him. There were ancient traditions and good Christian virtues in place to keep him safe this night. And what is more, he had his huskarls with him, each strong and brave warriors. Of this he assured himself. "My lord Armbruskirfir," said the strong young man at his side. "Son," he asked, turning to him, "there should be no more hindrance in our approach to Nidaros. We'll arrive within the hour." Einar reported. "Thank you, Eindridi. I forget. Have you been here before?" "To the king's farm? No, father. Not while Magnus reigned or when Harald sits there. This shall be my first." "Well, this Harald has made himself quite a stylish hall in the place. You and I shall sit in warm splendor this night. Make certain you drink much of the king's mead, and remember—" He paused to look sternly. Excuse me. He'll have to look sternly in his son's eyes. "If he offers you wine, you make sure you drink as much of it as you can. They say his store of wine is from as far as the empire of Miklagard itself." Eindridi laughed. "They say this wine is grafted of the gods, make himself. I have heard such grand praise for this wine, and once in this sad life, I think it would be a good thing if we, the Thambarskelfir, were to drink deeply at the king's kettle of this precious wine." "Do you think he'll bend to our demands then?" the son asked. "He had better. Arresting my man and calling him a thief, I will have a reckoning of him. Free him, and then we'll talk. You see, I don't think he knows of the Fjord yet." "How can that be? This is his kingdom and these his lands. He must have spies circling the country, and an army of peasants isn't something he'll be like to ignore." "Perhaps not. But he will listen when I tell him I have them assembling. His tyranny can no longer go unanswered. I think he has now gone too far. Taking Sigurd and accusing him of a thief was too damn far. So I shall approach and will attend the thing. We hold the power here. His raiding forces disband after the marauding they do each spring. If we come to this table with the only assembled army, and he knows we can use it," he nodded to himself, "we may be able to diminish this king's power, elevate our own, and force a new order around here." Harald Sigurdsson will not be pleased to learn all this." Einar laughed again. "I care not for this king's happiness. I care for Sigurd's release. We are here to secure a future for ourselves in this kingdom, and the kingdom cannot stand while it's afraid of its own head. No, we will make certain as Harald sees the folly in opposing the concessions we suggest here." "He has married the Thorbergs of Giske. That is not a union so easily dwindled." "I know. And their lands are powerful, their warriors stout and far away. We will hold the influence if we but move swiftly. I think speed is the key now. I'll meet the king tonight, and it will be all platitudes. I think he'd rather show me the wealth he can bring to bear with a feast for us too. Perhaps you as well. But I mean to show him my fearlessness first." Eindridi cocked his head. "Oh? And father, how do you think you'll do that?" Einar smiled and stroked his silver beard. "I'm going to walk into his hall alone, without you or the huskarls. Boldly! I shall open the doors myself and demand a drink first thing. We must begin this meeting with strength and show no retreating the whole time we are there. That will be my key to victory. Father, you think that wise? Wisdom and strength are my great virtues, son. I am protected by more than just the laws of a kingdom. There is magic in the respect men show for tradition. It can be used as a shield or as a sword. Tonight I'll make sure to use it as both. That is why I cannot delay. I must show my fearlessness first. As soon as we arrive, come on you and get us to shore, he barked to those rowing behind him. I will trust you, father, Eindridi said. You have been right so far, and few can doubt your wisdom. He searched for a better word than fear. Hesitation comes only from this King Harald. How do you know we can trust he'll attend these ancient laws? I trust 3 people, son. You, myself, and God. And tonight it is the trust I put into God for the behavior of others, and myself for my own. Live as this, my son. Learn well how I wield my trust. It may gain you a crown one day. We approach the bay now, Lord, shouted the steerboardman as he saw that his lord had turned from the shore. But for tonight, let us see if we can pull a crown from the head of a giant. Sometime later, the longships of Einar Tambarskelfir slammed into the dock. At his instruction, his might and presence was to be made clear. The king had invited him here to discuss the make of the kingdom, and he'd not allow for a moment of weakness in anything. Einar stepped off the ship and stomped along the dock with a deeply satisfied step. His misgivings were behind him. Every step he took made him feel like he was walking to the victory he'd spent his life working for. Tonight, Harald would be his friend and ally. He'd force the man to respect him, and he'd become the most powerful lord in all Norway. Once the most powerful lord in Norway, who knows? Perhaps the throne would be in reach again. While Magnus had ruled as a young boy, Einar had been king in all but name, confidant, advisor, trusted friend, and steward of the decision of the king while the boy was learning. He loved it, and he wanted it again. He wanted to give that power to his son one day. Einar walked at the front of his son and Huskarl's up the hill toward the thing room within Harald's hall. There before him were the burning torches around the doorway. Some guards were posted outside, and he smiled as he saw them. He huffed for the exertion as he walked, but this moment would ring out through history, and he was excited. Harald, old friend, he said to himself as he approached, rehearsing what he might say. King Harald, I'm glad you invited me here. Shall we talk? No, nothing so sudden. Let him offer you the goods of his feast first. He nodded at this. Do not be the first to mention Sigurd. He knows he is in the wrong, and he'll bring it up. Or he'll get nervous that you do not. Yes, behave like you don't even care about the man or the charge. At the top of the hill stood the wooden stakes that marked the outer perimeter of the hall's defenses, and Einar stopped here a moment. He put a hand on the post that supported the graven gate door, and he breathed heavily for the climb. I'm getting old, he said as he clenched his teeth and leaned back, inhaling a long breath and exhaling dramatically. Yes, well, that's to be expected. Shall we go in now, father? No, I meant what I said. I'll go in alone and show our strength. The laws of hospitality and the guest rights, remember. I want to show that I don't fear him. We'll have him receive me alone first. You all wait here for the time being and attend the cold a bit. I'll send for your invitation in a time, but I want him to see me alone first. Who knows? He might even be more amenable if he sees me alone. Remember that last time I came here, I brought a mighty host to challenge him, but he showed his cool nerve. Now I Yes, now I come without any retinue, exactly the opposite of what last I was. Do not fret, I'll summon you all soon, and he'll see the power of my action. He breathed hard again for a moment. There's nothing to worry about, my son. Let me go and be ready to come in and join us. We'll talk alone for a time, and then we can open the discussion. My demands might even seem better to him if we begin this way. I have thought all this through, son. Einar turned to the door and cracked the old joints in his neck. He raised his shoulders and felt the sweat settle under his fur cloak. He breathed out one last mighty cloud of air and made for the door. He noted one of the torches near him and decided to take it in hand, and was pleased that it lifted from the ground easily. The wind whipped the flame about, and he felt powerful holding the fire. He grabbed the handle of the right door and pulled with all his considerable strength, and it opened to his satisfaction. He stood there a moment in the cold of the night, illuminated brilliantly with a torch in his left hand, and walked inside. The hall within was dark, but for some candles that burned on the distant table, and he fixed on those instantly. That table was where he'd meet Harald. He took one step forward, and the door started to close behind him. This caused him a moment's hesitation, and he looked back to see who was closing them. Servants so soon ready to meet. His words were cut short as he saw that who it was that closed the doors were not servants at all, but rather fully armed and armored men. The predatory-looking eye-holes in the helms appeared especially menacing in the low light of the candles behind him. "What is this?" he asked in a moment of panic that he tried to leverage into a commanding tone, but then his blood turned cold. He heard the unmistakable scrape of blades being drawn from leather sheathed and spun to the sound. Einar Thambarskelfir turned to face the room and saw men-shaped figures looming in the darkness, with flashing silver blades catching the light. These teeth in the night were each headed for him. He put up his hands instinctively, and the torch went forward, showing 10 warriors with born steel closing on him. "No," he said, but their momentum was unceasing, and soon he felt the sharp burn as the first sword cut into his body. He grunted in pain, but another sword hacked at him from the left, and this forced him to drop the torch. "No," he said louder, though he could feel his strength going already. More dead blades emerged from the dark and buried themselves in his flesh, cutting open his belly and into his chest. He looked down and saw his gut exposed by the terrible steel, and only now did he have the inkling to fight. Einar reached down and grabbed the blade where it had sunk into his right side and turned to pull it free, his clutch on the blade causing him to bleed from through his fingers. Through the pain, he held strong and started to charge his right shoulder to the wielder. It mattered not at all, as another sword struck into him from behind, and he felt more of his strength bleed out of him. He heard a splash and knew that his entrails must have fallen from his opened belly. He groaned weakly in the dark hall and knew he was dead. A quiet fell over the hall then, save for the labored breathing of Einar as he slowly bled out his life onto the floor. They could also now hear that there was pounding on the door behind them. Someone was screaming to get in. Every one of the guards parted for the footsteps that lumbered behind them. Harald Sigurdsson, King of Norway, walked calmly to Einar, lit only by the dim sputtering light of the fallen torch. He knelt down and looked the Thambarskelfir in the eye. He rested his hands on his knees and held a knife in his left hand. The knife was crusted with jewels that glimmered in the weak light. "Einar, I am disappointed. What do you think an army of peasants would have done? What could they have gained you? Farmers, fishermen, blacksmiths? Would you have ended right here? You would have ended right here no matter. Perhaps having burned a few villages, but then you can see that your time to act was when you brought those men here to boast." Harald stood and sheathed the Emperor's knife. "I think perhaps that's our difference, Einar. You boast of action. I let my actions boast of themselves. Kill him. A sword blade was then swung out to his neck and dragged back ungently, cutting away the rest of his life. Einar Thambarskelfir was too weak even to put his hand to his neck. He but fell forward into the puddle of his own gore and lay there. The pounding on the door continued to increase. And see who that is. They seem to want something. The guard removed the lock beam that had been dropped to hold closed the door and pulled them open quickly. There on the other side, swords and axes drawn, were Eindridi and the Huskarls. Father! Eindridi yelled and rushed in. You bastard! He shouted as he dashed in. He clearly meant to leap over his father's body and make for Harald. The king turned and saw the swift approach, the boy's silhouette framed by the open doors. He was suspended in the air, arms held in a position to keep balance and ready to strike when he landed. As Harald watched, a blade swung in from his left and chopped straight into the boy's neck. As his own momentum increased the force of the blow, the king of Norway stood unmoving as the head of Eindridi Thambarskelfir tumbled past his left foot, and the body landed on the floor with the coordination of a pile of stones. Lord, asked a quivering voice from outside the hall. Harald almost wanted to kill the man who'd made so pitiable a sound, but he steeled himself and stepped over the bodies of his primary opposition in kingship. Again, he felt that feeling, that strange and wonderful feeling of the reclamation of power, when he'd slaughtered the emperor's attendant, when he'd cut the fucking balls off the emperor, when he'd escaped the empress's niece, when he took Elisif for his own, when he told Magnus he was buying his kingdom, when Magnus died, when he destroyed the Ghost Raiders. The feeling he would have when he did the same with Svein Ulfsen. All these moments had filled him with a sensation that was completely indescribable. Only a king can know what this was like. Each victory, a log in the flame that it was. But there was still the image of that man from the battle with the raiders, the Varangian, the one he'd recognized from his time in Miklagard, unmistakable. The memory of that man who had escaped, the white bear that was still out there, somewhere. He must be. That terrified him. Your lords are dead, Harald said as he emerged from the open doors and was illuminated by the blustering torchlight. Are you? The Huskarls all hesitated at this strange question. They looked between each other, each with weaponry out and in a defensive ring as Harald's own forces surrounded them. As I see things, here are your choices. You can fight valiantly for dead lords, you can struggle and bleed and be crushed, or you can each sheathe your weapons. I won't ask you to throw them down, and kneel to me, here. Go get horns of mead. This last he muttered to his attendant Einar, who was by his side. Yes, Lord King, the man said quietly, and with a bow, he ran off quickly. Death, awful and painful, each of you glutted in the snow and dirt below you. Have you each made your peace with Christ? Has he made his peace with you? And are you so committed to these dead behind me that you are ready to follow them, but for your oaths? I think those oaths are dead now too. Who here would die with honor to the dead? Who here would rather live with honor for the king? None within the circle of men spoke. They had only close weapons, no spear or bow between them. Harald truly wondered if they would try and kill him, if they had, but he didn't care. Strength was what he needed from these men. The first man to put his weapon back into the sheath, he made a show of sliding the longsword into the leather at his side. Then he walked a short distance toward Harald and knelt in the cold dirt. I will serve Lord the king, he said. Fortunately, Einar returned with two large horns, so full they spilled mead over the sides. Good! Then drink here your allegiance. I want all here to remember that you broke no oaths while your lords were alive. You break none in swearing to me either. You make only the wise and rational decision to serve your king in this act. This is not a breach of your honor, but the reposition of it. Another man came forth while he stabbed the haft of his axe down through the ring in his belt and knelt before Harald. He took the offered horn and poured out a sip into the dirt. To the king, he said, and took a drink. To the king, another said, taking the horn and doing the same. Eindridi was my kin, one said. His sword was still out, but he made no move to attack yet. And what are you going to do about it? Harald said harshly, walking past the 5 who'd already bowed. There were 7 more who still stood, though 3 were in the process of sheathing their weapons. Harald walked through the kneeling men, unfearing. I can't let this be. I cannot serve the man who killed my cousin. The man's features were clear in the torchlight, and Harald could easily see the familial semblance. He stood tall and held his axe across his body. You are going to have to kill me. Harald took another step forward, feeling safe in doing so. And that, my friend, he said to the man when they were close, is why I cannot. This here now, this is more honor shown than many I have seen in my life. You are exactly the man I will not kill. You came here in a ship. You will take a bag of gold and provisions, go down to the ship, which is now yours. I banish you with all the pride and honor you deserve. Any who wish to join him may do so, with similar offers made. But I warn you, if you have already drunk your allegiance, then making a move to take this will be rebellion. So you who remain defiant, will you bend, or will you accept exile? He asked with a shout. I will go. I will take exile. I will stay. Lord King Harald. The horns were passed around to all who knelt. Only 2 were left standing, both with sheathed weapons. Everyone else will go into the hall and feast with me, your king. And you 2, what are your names? I am Godric Stephenson, said the first. And I am Selvig Luedir, the other said, with strength in his voice. I will not forget these names, or your faces. You show good character here. Now get the fuck out of my kingdom. That chapter. Apparently, it's a real event. I know how often I say this, but apparently, Einar Thambarskerfir showed up to King Harald's hall in Nidaros, completely trusting in all of the things, and was just butchered. It's amazing. I was a little bit taking of liberties when it came to the decapitation of his son, literally over his father's body as he jumped upon him, but who cares? Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that chapter, and thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time, thank you again. Goodbye.